Twitter is really into banning people these days. And of course, most of them happen to be conservatives, like Mike Davis. He's the founder and president of Unsilenced Majority and was recently suspended. If you're going to get suspended for something, go hard or go home. He criticized, we're just going to be real gentle with that, and we'll let him explain. He criticized CNN's Brian Stelter. So he's here to talk about that and the power of big tech. Mike, it's good to see you. And I mean, we kind of chuckle about it, but at the same time, it's absurdity to highlight absurdity. It's insane for what people can be suspended over, but then what they're seemingly protected from being suspended over. So just tell the folks, I mean, sure, I know that I love Pulp Fiction, I love Quentin Tarantino. What did you compare Brian Stelter to?
Thank you for having me. So a conservative big tech critic criticized Brian Stelter from CNN, comparing him to the Gemp from the movie Pulp Fiction. He got suspended. So I came to his defense and mocked Twitter for suspending someone for making this joke, and then they suspended me from Twitter for defending this guy for getting suspended. So, and actually, Dana, this is the third time in 6 months. I got suspended after that for raising an issue about President Joe Biden's immigration policy, and I got suspended for that as well. So I've been suspended 3 times in 6 months. They'll come back and say after we raise the issue with members of Congress, with people in the media on both sides, not just conservatives, but even liberal media, along with influencers on Twitter, Twitter will come back and say that it was a mistake that they were canceling, but in reality, it's because I'm running organizations that are trying to hold big tech accountable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because after I saw you and the issue of you and Stelter, apparently he's like a super protected principal on Twitter. I have no idea. But all of these people began sharing their stories. They said things they just spoke out in defense of you, didn't even retweet the original thing or say the original sentiment, and then they were suspended until they deleted that. And then you had your account, to be clear, you had your account reinstated, but not without first deleting that offending tweet, correct?
Well, actually, I didn't back down. I did not defend.
Oh.
I have not deleted any of the 3 tweets that got me suspended. Twitter backed. They backed down to pressure from Congress. They backed down to pressure from the media, again, on both sides, not just conservatives. They backed down to conservative influencers. I refuse to back down. Here's the issue. I have these good connections where I can go to members of Congress. I can go to the media. I can go to these influencers. What I'm trying to do with my organizations, both the Internet Accountability Project and Unsilenced Majority, is to give a voice to everyday Americans who get censored, who get silenced, who get deplatformed, who get canceled, and they don't have a voice, and we're trying to provide that voice for them.
And you bring up a really good point. You have these connections in Congress, whereas regular everyday people, even small business owners who are on social media, they're on Twitter, they don't have that access. And so that's what, when you're doing Unsilenced Majority and Internet Accountability Project, that's what you're looking to do is, okay, well, my contacts can be your contacts. Let's all work together and let's hold these companies accountable.
That's exactly right. We want to provide a voice for everyday Americans. And the key is that big tech has too much power. And the reason they have too much power is we have not enforced our century-old antitrust laws. We have antitrust amnesty in this country, and we need to end it. And we are for law enforcement. As conservatives, we do not believe in amnesty. And the best way to ensure a free market is to have a functioning market. And that's why we need to enforce our antitrust laws.
So help me talk to some of the conservatives out there who might be either lowercase L. I'm lowercase L on some things. I'm not capital L libertarian. But, you have some people out there on the right who bring up issues. They say, well, this is a private business, and we don't want to compromise a principle by telling a private business what to do. I have one friend who is so resolutely, even at their own peril, they say, oh, well, antitrust laws, this is the opposite of capitalism, and I can't compromise my principle on that. But I think, well, what other acts do you actually support that you may not really go through that full thought process that really are kind of, compromises of your principle? But this is a bigger issue here. What do you say to those people who make that argument and that kind of, because I feel like we have a lot of that on the right?
So I would say that in order to have a free market, you must have a functioning market. And the way you ensure a functioning market is to enforce our antitrust laws. They have been on the books for a century, and they are law enforcement. They are the opposite of regulation. You are targeting the bad actors. You are targeting the woke trillion-dollar big tech monopolists, Google Apple, Amazon, Facebook, along with their, I call them the bar-fighting little brother, Twitter. If you enforce,
That's a great way to put that.
our antitrust laws, they will not have the power to censor, silence, deplatform, or cancel conservatives. We have to enforce our antitrust laws. We do not believe in amnesty, and it is a pro-free market, conservative Republican approach. Teddy Roosevelt trust busting.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point as well. Talking with Mike Davis with Unsilenced Majority and Internet Accountability Project. Section 230, big O argument that I think now a lot more people have a greater understanding of Section 230 and exactly what created it and what it really does mean. Because I've never been for the repeal of 230, but I do think absolutely we have to have a modification, because it seems crazy to think that editing algorithms or curating things based on political ideology isn't a form of essentially publishing. What are your thoughts on that? And didn't at one time Democrats agree with Republicans on it? Why did they stop? Where's the momentum?
Well, Section 230 was enacted by Congress back in 1996 to protect these internet infants, these internet startups, from getting crushed by the publishers in this country. It was to protect them from defamation lawsuits based upon what the users were posting. So fast forward 25 years now, and these internet infants from 1996 are now trillion-dollar big tech monopolists. And they have this antitrust amnesty plus Section 230 immunity, and they are turning the Section 230 immunity from a shield to protect them from defamation lawsuits based upon their users' post into a sword to go after conservatives and deplatform them, to cancel them. So we need to reform Section 230. I think there needs to be a debate whether it needs to be a straight up repeal or simply an amendment to 230, but the status quo is unacceptable.
Yeah, completely unacceptable, and it's gone beyond. It's gone beyond entirely what it was intended for. I just think if you have an entity like the Washington Post that's held responsible for unprotected speech or liability against unprotected speech, Twitter actually determines the news. Their trending topics actually drive news stories. They are a publisher for all intents and purposes. They may not call themselves one, but they sure as heck function as one. Why should they be privileged and excluded?
They shouldn't, and it's even worse than that, because it's Section 2. It's government granted immunity. They are essentially becoming government-sponsored censors. So we have to look at how is this not a First Amendment violation when you have the government sponsoring your censorship and actually encouraging your censorship? It needs to end.
That's a great point. That's a point that I have not considered prior. That is not a point that I've considered before our conversation here, because that's ultimately what it is. I mean, you can't try sue Twitter for defamation. It's never going to happen. And those cases are so hard to litigate anyway. Go up against a big corporation like Twitter, they can just say, oh, well, Section 230, we're excluded. We have that privilege. That's that Jack Dorsey privilege.
Yeah. I mean, they control, big tech controls the online public square. And they are if they try to, let's say that they try to exclude people based upon their views on race, if they try to exclude African Americans based upon race, would they argue under Section 230 that they have the right to do that? That's a good question for big tech.
And I've seen you, I was actually looking at some other conversations that you've been involved in as well, because this even kind of can go past Twitter and Facebook. When you look at for instance, things like Shopify or online purchasing where influencers sell stuff through social media platforms, and there exist these apps that actually process this stuff through those platforms, then it does get into an issue of commerce as well. So there's a lot of things to consider with this. Last quick question for you, talking with Mike Davis, founder and president of Unsilenced Majority. I saw this piece, Daily Caller had it. A group of centrist Democrats have asked House leaders to slow down consideration of a half dozen antitrust proposals opposed by big tech companies that the bills target. Well, why have they done that? That seems to be kind of a change of heart for them. What's going on?
So Google they're a $1 trillion monopolist, and they have a lot of influence in DC because they buy off these politicians. Congressman Ken Buck, the Republican from Colorado, is leading the bipartisan charge on these antitrust bills in the House. They are really important pieces of legislation that can hold big tech accountable for their abuses, for their market abuses. And you hear Republicans, even Republicans who we generally like on many other issues, like Jim Jordan from Ohio, opposing this legislation. Well, what I would say to those members like Jim Jordan, okay, if you oppose Congressman Buck's bipartisan plan, What's your plan? Besides taking Google's money, besides taking big tech's money and kicking the can down the road and giving them 4 more years of antitrust amnesty, what is your plan to hold big tech accountable?
Exactly. There you go. Mike Davis, good to talk with you. Appreciate what you do with this. You're going to have a long fight ahead, as you know, but we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.